The court was still and silent, the kind of silence that preceded a storm. Outside, the winds howled, but inside the courtroom, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The Brown family saga had come to this moment, a reckoning, a culmination of years of turmoil, betrayal, and emotional chaos. The legal battle had begun innocently enough, an attempt to settle a few ownership disputes, a disagreement here and there, but it had grown into something much more. This wasn't just about property. It was about power, control, and the dismantling of a family. And today, it would all come to a head. At the heart of this legal drama stood Kody Brown, the patriarch of the polygamous Brown family. But despite his years of authority and dominance, today, Kody's power had been stripped away. The court had already made its decision. Janelle and Meri's properties, once part of the family's assets, were to be returned to them. Kody had lost the final legal battle, and the game he had so expertly played for years was over. Chapter 1. The Breaking Point. It had been a long time coming. Aurora had been the first to notice the cracks in the family's carefully constructed facade, the subtle shifts in dynamics that spoke of betrayal. But for Janelle and Meri, the truth was harder to face. Kody had always been a master manipulator, using charm, guilt, and emotional blackmail to maintain his hold on the family. But as his attention turned increasingly toward Robyn, the other wives had been forced to confront the reality of his favoritism. It wasn't just a matter of affection anymore. It was a matter of control. For years, Janelle had tried to keep her marriage to Kody intact, doing everything she could to keep the peace. But the emotional toll had become too much. Kody's fixation on Robyn, his increasing neglect of their relationship, and his blatant disregard for her needs had worn Janelle down. The tipping point came when Kody tried to take control of their finances, making decisions about their properties without consulting her. Meri, too, had felt the shift in Kody's priorities. While she had once been the one closest to him, his feelings for her had faded over time. In many ways, she had always been the outsider in the family, caught between the world of polygamy and the world of her own personal desires. But when Kody asked her to give up ownership of the property they had once shared, the final straw had snapped. She had put up with enough. In both cases, Kody had assumed that they would comply, that they would accept his dominance and quietly fall in line. But he had underestimated them. Janelle and Meri had found strength in each other, a bond formed from shared experiences and mutual understanding. They had quietly begun to fight back, consulting lawyers, and carefully gathering evidence of Kody's manipulative behavior. They weren't just fighting for property. They were fighting for their dignity, their autonomy, and their right to control their own lives. Chapter 2. The Legal Battle. The courtroom was packed with people, reporters, family friends, and curious onlookers who had followed the Brown family's every move for years. The legal case had become a media circus, but to Janelle and Meri, it was all too real. They were no longer just victims of Kody's manipulation. They were fighting for what they had built, what they had sacrificed. Kody sat at the front of the room, his face hard and emotionless. He had been fighting this battle for months, determined to retain control over every aspect of his family's life. But today, he looked weary. He had been forced to admit things he had long buried, things that no one outside the family had ever known. The details of his emotional neglect toward Janelle and Meri were now laid bare for the world to see. Janelle took the witness stand first, her voice steady but filled with the quiet strength of someone who had finally found her voice. "I trusted Kody," she began, her words clear and deliberate. "I trusted him with everything. Our family, our finances, our property. And for years, I was told that I had a place in this family. But the truth is, my needs were never a priority." Kody was focused on Robyn, and the rest of us were pushed aside. Janelle went on to explain how Kody had made unilateral decisions about their property, including the sale of her assets without her consent. She presented documents that proved her ownership and highlighted the ways Kody had taken advantage of her trust. Meri's testimony was equally powerful. She spoke of the emotional distance between her and Kody, the way he had withdrawn from her over time, despite their shared history. She talked about how Kody had asked her to relinquish control over their joint property, and how, when she refused, he had attempted to manipulate her into signing over her stake. "Kody doesn't see us as equals," Meri said, her voice tinged with sadness. "He sees us as tools in his game. And when we're no longer useful to him, we're cast aside." As Meri spoke, Kody's eyes flicked between her and the judge. He looked uncomfortable, but he did not speak. For the first time, he seemed to realize the depth of the situation. He was losing. His control over the family was slipping away, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The final blow came when the judge called for the return of Janelle and Meri's properties. The legal documents were read aloud, and it was confirmed that Kody had no legal claim over the properties in question. He had been stripped of his ownership, and the judge ordered that the properties be returned to Janelle and Meri immediately. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, and Kody's face went white. He had lost. The game he had been playing for so long was over. Chapter 3. The Aftermath. In the days that followed, the Brown family was a whirlwind of emotions. Janelle and Meri were elated, but there was no joy in victory. Their struggle had come at a steep emotional cost, and they were left to pick up the pieces of their broken relationships with Kody. Kody, on the other hand, was a shell of the man he once was. The loss of control was too much for him to bear. His grip on the family had faltered, and without it, he was lost. Robyn, too, seemed distant. Her support for Kody had been unwavering during the trial, but even she couldn't deny the toll it had taken on him. Kody attempted to salvage what remained of his relationships with the other wives, but the damage was done. Janelle and Meri were no longer willing to accept his behavior. They had seen the truth, and it had freed them. They no longer needed Kody's approval or validation. Meri took the opportunity to leave the family, feeling that her time in the polygamous relationship had come to an end. She moved into a small apartment, away from the chaos and the manipulation. She began to build a life for herself, free from Kody's control. It was a new beginning, one that was both liberating and frightening. But Meri was determined to find happiness on her own terms. Janelle, though still connected to the family by ties of history and shared children, knew that her path forward was uncertain. She had spent years sacrificing her needs for the sake of the family, but now she could begin to prioritize herself. The return of her property was not just about the physical assets. It was about the first steps toward financial independence. And while it was daunting, she felt empowered for the first time in years. Chapter 4. Kody's Reckoning. Kody, however, was left to confront the consequences of his actions. He had spent so many years playing the role of the charismatic patriarch, but now he was exposed. The world saw him for what he truly was, a man driven by ego, manipulation, and a desire for control. His relationships with his wives had crumbled, and even his connection with Robyn was strained. His fixation on Robyn had cost him everything. He had sacrificed his relationship with Janelle, Meri, and the rest of his family for the sake of a dream that was never really his. The court's decision had been the final blow, but it had also been a moment of clarity. Kody needed to change, or he would lose everything that mattered. He reached out to his children, trying to rebuild those connections he had let slip away. But the damage was done. The wounds of the past were deep, and healing would take time. Epilogue: A New Beginning. The Brown family was no longer the unit it had once been. Kody's cheating game was over, and his control had been shattered. Janelle and Meri, though scarred by the years of manipulation, had found their way back to themselves. They had reclaimed their property, their dignity, and their futures. As for Kody, the road ahead was uncertain. The family he had known was no more, and the only question that remained was whether he could rebuild the pieces of his life, or if he had already lost them forever.